Welcome, everyone, to episode 41 of the RDH Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chad. Joined alongside me is my brother, Tanner. How's it hanging, dude?
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you've noticed a difference because it looks good. We've got the socials down there. You can take a look if you're on mobile, if you're listening through your headphones, we got rdh.sports for the Instagram, rdh_sports for Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, and rdh.sports for TikTok. So go check us out on YouTube if you haven't yet already, and check out what we got cooking over here in the lab.
It is a rebrand, folks. It is a rebrand. Tanner came on the podcast 40 episodes ago, 41 episodes ago now, a little bit more than that, but he has come in just by storm, right? He's come in by storm. Tanner's the basketball guy, the sports whiz, also my brother, and not to mention the fact he's just made this podcast look and sound so much better. The reason that I don't sound like I'm crackling through your headphones or your car steering wheel, you know what I mean, is because of this microphone if you're watching on YouTube. And, hey, Tanner's the sound engineer in the brains behind the whole operation. All I do is just write stuff on a document. We talk about it, right? Like Tanner said, find us on the socials. We went through a full rebrand. If you're on Spotify, welcome to the new logo with the microphone in the middle. What I'm saying, Tanner, let's get going. Today we're talking all football, right? The usual. We're talking all football. It's football season. We're going to be talking it. We got the latest NFL news. We got some coaching news. We got some playoff football. And something else that I'm going to tease here in a sec. Tanner, you ready to dive into all this?
Dude, I have been ready since day one.
He was born ready, folks. Is what that means. You haven't heard that before. We came up
Absolutely.
with that before the show, by the way. So, like Tanner said, rdh.sports on Instagram. That's really posted a ton of our stuff. Twitter, we're not as active. And TikTok, we got some solid reels that go on there, right? But if you want to look at all of the prospects and everything that we got going into the NFL draft, really check out our Instagram. Once again, rdh.sports. And I just released the top 9 quarterback prospect rankings. So I've got, on there, we've got from Caleb Williams to see who's number 9, right? We don't know where Caleb Williams ranks. He's in there somewhere. But we got all these quarterbacks. All you got to do is go to our Instagram, check it out. It's a slideshow. It made it really easy for you. And we're going to be releasing all those articles on Instagram, and we're going to be releasing them on our website, rdhsports.net. Also, if you're listening to the podcast, you have any questions, reach out to us on any of our social channels or email us at rdhsportspodcast.com. Now, first segment of the show is we're talking NFL news. Next segment of the show, we're going to be talking NFL Conference Championship matchup preview and picks. So 2 segments today, not a ton. For those college football listeners, wait till next week because I'm going to dive into that article with all of the quarterbacks. That's right. I'm getting quarterbacks out of the way first because from last year, I was told, Chat, care about his quarterbacks in the first round from a lot of our viewers. So, hey, I listened, and now the article's out. So, NFL news. Tanner and I always talk about NFL football. And a couple episodes ago, we were talking about the coaching carousel. We didn't talk about it last episode too much, but this episode, get ready. We got a lot of coaches that signed. We're going to start off with the biggest one. Harbaugh. Harbaugh, out of Michigan to the Chargers. Once again, if you listen to the episode, Tanner and I called that. We knew that was happening. Breaking sports platform here. What do you think about that one, Tanner? It's a scary signing for the Chargers.
It's scary good. It's just one of those things where I think they got exactly what they were missing. You look at the Chargers, you look at Brandon Staley, his tenure there, and it just they have a lot of really good pieces. They've assembled a lot of really good players in their whole roster. I mean, Justin Herbert's just a beast of a quarterback. When he's playing well, he's not hurt, nothing like that. He's a really good quarterback in this league, and you give Harbaugh that situation, that roster, and let him, do what he does with the culture, establish his own, team stuff and like that, make that team his own. And you have a really good football team. I mean, I saw a stat that came out that was like, when Harbaugh was on the Niners, whenever he left and everything like that, and he came back into the NFL, he now has the highest winning percentage of any active head coach. So that speaks volumes.
He's number 5 all time.
Which is dumb because he realistically, he was only in here for, not that many seasons in the NFL. He made a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick during that time. And it's just, I think it just shows how good of a head coach he is. And I really think that this Chargers roster, if you're a Chargers fan, get excited because he's going to turn this program around. They have everything they need to succeed now. No excuses, absolutely none anymore. Your head coach is one of the best in the country. He's won a national championship. It's just he's been to a Super Bowl before, and unfortunately he lost, but he's been there. He's done that. He's made that run, and I could totally see him doing it again. So I think it's fun too. He keeps it in house. He used to be a Chargers quarterback himself, and now he's coaching them. So I think it's really cool that he's getting that opportunity, and it's gonna be a scary team. It's gonna be a scary team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just pulling up their roster right now because I really want to jump into this team, and specifically with this team, I really want to jump in on the offensive side of the ball. Because that's what Harbaugh brings to the table, right? Everybody that's watched football, for those folks that aren't necessarily familiar with John Harbaugh and you're listening to the podcast, well, let me tell you, like Tanner just said, he won the national championship, one of the best recruiting coaches in college football in the last. He was at Michigan. He got really close to a national championship, but he couldn't get past Ohio State. He finally got past Ohio State, finally jumped up to that next level of coach. And what's crazy to think about is Michigan was going to offer him a 10-year contract a couple of years ago. Harbaugh, essentially just wanted to wait till the end of his contract, and then after that was going to evaluate his options. Was the realistically was the first head coach that was hired even before Bill Belichick. That tells you how good this guy is. That tells you how high he is on teams' boards. And the Chargers aren't messing around because the Chargers have a roster of, like Tanner was saying, Justin Herbert with that quarterback, right? That's the top 10 quarterback in the league. I know it's crazy to say, but it's a top 10 quarterback in the league, and he didn't play like it last season. Whether it be the injuries or whether it be Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator that did not help anything, or the head coach that didn't help anything, right? He's got a young offensive line. He's got some real good. He's got some, and they invested some high draft picks on the offensive line. And a lot of these contracts I'm seeing right now don't seem to be up anytime soon. So, like Tanner was saying, the Chargers are in a very good spot, and offensively they can only get better. Right? Keenan Allen is not falling off at all. You're going to probably start to see that year-over-year regression with Keenan Allen probably in a couple seasons. Oh, but guess what? You have Williams that you already locked up to a contract, Mike Williams, right? And they drafted the speedster out of TCU, Quentin Johnson, started to come on at the end of the season last year. It was a first-round draft pick. Was my number 2 wide receiver.
Hasn't turned any heads. Just saying.
He hasn't done anything.
Nothing.
Right? He hasn't done a single thing. They didn't have Harbaugh.
True.
And Kellen Moore, I mean, that may have been the worst offense in football last year. I'm not going to lie to you. Statistically, they were in the bottom of the league, but I mean, they were just brutal to watch. Got some Chargers friends. Sorry about that. And hey, I live an hour from there, so yeah, I know a lot about Chargers football now. But it's the biggest takeaway from this hire, that the Chargers aren't necessarily lacking on the defensive side of the ball. Right? They have an aging defensive line with Khalil Mack and Bosa. They have some pretty speedy linebackers in there, right? They've also got a really good defensive back with Derwin James. So you've got one of the best safeties in the league. You've got a pretty solid defensive line, but you bring Harbaugh in really to be an offensive guru, right? Be not. Because how did the Niners get to the Super Bowl that year? Who did they have on their team? Navarro Bowman, one of the best linebackers. Patrick Willis. I mean, these guys were the elite of the elite, and the reason that the Niners were there. The Niners didn't get to the Super Bowl because of Harbaugh's offensive coaching. That's not what happened. They got there because they were solid on the defensive side of the ball. So, what's going to happen with this Charger team? Because it's arguably as good of a defense. The offense is arguably way better. So, I think it's nowhere to go but up from here. And the only question after that long-winded answer and explanation that I have for you, Tanner, where do you see the Chargers finishing next season? You see them I don't necessarily see them finishing first in their division, but I don't think they're the last place team in that division.
No.
I think they're between second and third.
No, I mean within the division you got KC, Vegas, and the Broncos. And then so the Broncos are kind of going downhill. The Raiders, you could say, are going uphill, and the Chiefs are obviously going uphill. So I would honestly maybe second. If Harbaugh gets a quick turnaround, I'll say second. And there's just, like you said, it's a lot of talent on that roster. It's just hard, going into that to see them lose. They have so much potential. And if Harbaugh even gets that culture going even a little bit, that team's going to be good, extremely disciplined, and they're going to not make nearly as many mistakes as they did this year. I mean, just the guys on defense alone, you give them an actual head coach, no offense to Brandon Staley, but those guys were not fighting for Brandon Staley. These guys will fight for Harbaugh, and Harbaugh knows that, and he's going to get them going. So I really don't think the turnaround is going to be that slow. We talked a couple episodes about like rebuilding and kind of like the steps that you need to take for a team to rebuild. But this is not a rebuild. This is what we like to call a reload, because it's just one of those things where you're quick turnaround. You see Bill Belichick used to do it a lot in New England. And so I think that's what they're doing. I think they're going to finish second, at worst third. I don't think they're bottom of their division at all.
Yeah. And moving to, moving on, that was, that's the biggest coaching hire to date right now. Belichick is still out there. Belichick has not been signed yet, so that's really the one that is question marks to me. Why has Belichick not been signed yet? Why was Belichick not the first candidate signed? He's arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time. So needed to bring that one up. He officially didn't get hired by Atlanta. We'll hit who Atlanta has here in a second. What's your take on Bill Belichick not being signed yet, Tanner?
It's odd, to say the least. Like it's very strange, because I know we'll get into some of these other coaching hires, but kind of thinking about it, I know Atlanta signed they signed the old Bucks OC, right? Or is that
Correct?
Yeah.
Atlanta signed Raheem Morris.
No. So yeah, Atlanta signed the old Rams DC, and then Carolina signed the old Bucks OC in
Correct.
Dave Canales. Okay, yeah. So I just, my opinion on those as compared to Bill Belichick, where it's just, Bill Belichick, he's won 8 Super Bowls, 6 as a head coach, 2 as a dominant defensive coordinator, and it's just, I really don't understand it. I really don't, because he has, the ultimate resume to beat all resumes. I don't think that anyone's going to come out there as a better candidate for a head coaching job, obviously. But I think what a lot of the league is kind of turning to nowadays is, they want the next Mike McDaniels. They want the next Kyle Shanahan, the next McVay. Like, they want these young guys to come in there and create their own, kind of culture, create their own new age era football team. Because like I said, we've talked about it a lot with McDaniels. The way he runs his team is so different. He's a player's coach. When McVay came to the Rams, he transformed that team, and he was one of the younger head coach to do it. So I think what a lot of teams are going for nowadays is they want to find that next gem. That next set of coaches. People are going to talk about, it's like we've been talking about the McShanahan tree, I think is what it's called, with McVay and Shanahan. They just want to find the next one. They want to find the next young head coach who's going to transform a team. And I get that. I really do. But I think when you have as much talent, in the free agent market, the free agent head coaching market as there is, I think it's kind of a dumb way to play, because, these guys are proven, tested. They've been doing it for a long time. Speaking specifically about like Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, those guys. Maybe even Dan Quinn, throw them in there too. It's just, why? Why not? Like, why not these guys? Like, they're just not fit to be head coaches anymore, or it's just strange to me. It doesn't seem like the best decision, especially when you got these unproven guys coming in. And it's just a little odd. So, I mean, short answer is I don't really know why they're doing it, because if I were in that position, I would have signed Bill yesterday. Like, I think Bill had 2 interviews with the Falcons, and all the rumors were kind of saying that the Falcons were going to sign Bill. And if you're a Falcons fan, you got a young roster, talented roster, a lot of skill positions that, checkbox, they've been checked. How do you not sign him? So I'm not sure, because maybe they just want to go with a younger approach. I think that's the biggest thing, but I don't really know why.
I think you kind of nailed it. And to hit on your point, why aren't teams signing Bill Belichick, right? I do think they want that new young head coach, that new shiny toy, right? Like you
Yeah.
said, McVay. He came into Los Angeles and completely changed that football team and won a Super Bowl because of it,
Hmm.
right? Now, Atlanta, like realistically, does Raheem Morris give you a better chance to win than Bill Belichick?
No.
Vrabel?
No.
Pete Carroll if he's out there?
No.
No. So I'm also kind of in the train of why did the Falcons do that? In Falcons Nation, what are you thinking? What are you thinking of this hire? Are you excited? Or are you kind of bummed because you're looking at who's still out there, right? That's really a question, to the fans. To if you're watching on YouTube, I got Odin right next to me, my dog, and he's stretching. So new addition to the show. Why if you're in the Falcons front office,
Hmm.
right? If you're in the Falcons front office, if you're the general manager, because realistically, the general manager is the one making those decisions, right? If you're the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? Because tried that young approach with their previous head coach with Arthur Smith. They tried it. They already tried it. It didn't work. Right? It didn't work for Atlanta. He wasn't the guy. He wasn't the head coach. You're telling me that Kyle Pitts can't be utilized right? Okay, fine. You can chalk that one up. Bijan Robinson, you can't chalk that one up.
Hmm.
Drake London, you can't chalk that one up. Ben Ritter, their quarterback, okay, I'll give you that one. You know what I mean? I don't think Ritter's the future in Atlanta, but I don't know if Raheem Morris is either. So the reason I brought up Belichick is because I wanted to let the fans know that he is indeed still out there. And we now have a new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, like we were saying, with Raheem Morris, who was formerly the Rams defensive coordinator. The Rams didn't have that great of a defensive season this year. So I I don't really understand it personally, but that's what they're doing, right? They're trying the new head coach.
Hmm.
Last point I'll make on this, and I've been really dogging Atlanta this year. You know what I mean? And the reason I've been dogging them is because of the head coach. And I'm sorry, fans. I don't know if I can not dog you again because the hire. You know what I mean? I don't know if I can not dog you again because you're telling me that this guy has a better defensive mind than Bill Belichick?
Yeah. It's
Come on. Come on. You already interviewed the guy. Now, maybe the interview didn't go so well, right? Maybe Bill Belichick wanted to be general manager and the GM there was like, "Well, that's my job." Like
yeah.
maybe that's what happened in the room, right? Maybe that could be a conversation because he did do more than just be a head coach last year at New England, right? That's arguably why he might not done as well as he done because he was busy in the front office. So I don't know. We're gonna see what's gonna happen. But hey, all I know right now is Pete Carroll's still out there. Bill Belichick is still out there. They're not signed. Dallas better let Mike McCarthy go next season, and we can just drag them right in, and we're good. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's what I want to see. But like Tanner said, the next one we're going to hit on is the Panthers hired the new Bucks offensive coordinator as their head coach, Dave Canales. That one was reported today. That one is not necessarily set in stone yet. I don't think. I haven't seen it confirmed that he is the official new head coach, but I have seen rumors about that one. That's another one I don't really understand. The Bucks were what, a 9-8 football team, and arguably have had a better defense in previous seasons. So I don't really understand. Well, sorry, Bucks offensive coordinator. They've had a better offense in previous seasons, not defense. Better offense in previous seasons. I understand that Baker Mayfield got them to a playoff spot. I get that, but that's another hire that I didn't really understand. What do you think about that hire? What does the offensive coordinator do for the Panthers? I mean, anybody's going to be in the Panthers, but why?
I mean, it's a better hire, I'll say, than the Atlanta head coaching job. With the old Rams DC, but like. I think the reasoning behind it is just, they made Baker Mayfield work with his first season there, with everything that he's gone through. And, that offense has still continued to click and look really good against, a lot of good teams. But it just doesn't make a ton of sense because, again, look at who's on the board. Like, it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't bring in like a Mike Vrabel, if you bring Vrabel into that situation, that team's transformed. That team is absolutely a completely different team. And I'm not going to say they're making Super Bowls, but it gives them, I would say, a better chance than this guy. I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong, but I've seen Vrabel turn the Titans around. I've seen Vrabel basically create Derrick Henry in a lab. Obviously that didn't happen. He came from Alabama and he was really good there, but Vrabel unlocked his potential in the NFL. You saw that happen. You saw that Titans team go from nothing with Marcus Mariota to an AFC Championship team with Tannehill, and Derrick Henry back there, and like a young AJ Brown and stuff. And it's just, I, I don't think, I really understand what the Carolina Panthers are doing, especially after you go and have the season that you had with Bryce Young, your number one overall pick, who hasn't looked great so far. So I would get in there someone who can change a culture. And I don't know if the old Bucks OC and Dave Canales can do that, but we're gonna see. We're gonna see. In the Panthers are gonna learn the hard way because they like to get rid of head coaches after their first season, and maybe that's why they really didn't want to establish a culture. But it's mind boggling. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I really don't get it, like, at all. It's just one of those things, like, why? Another statement, why? It's mostly the same argument as the Atlanta head coaching job, but it's just why? Because I just don't think the Bucks old OC is going to come in there and create a culture like the Panthers need. They need a culture for that team to work because they don't have a lot else. So they got to have something they can rely on, and Belichick, Vrabel, Carroll, all these guys, even Dan Quinn, they could all do that. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't see the Panthers improving much over the course of next year. But hey, I could be wrong. You never know.
And I mean, like you said, anything's better, right? Like last season, they were the literal worst team in the NFL, and it just so happened that they don't have that draft pick, so it's not like they're going to be picking real high in the first round. So that's kind of a big one too. It's like a draft pick was already to Chicago in the DJ Moore trade, so you had the worst season that you could possibly have to lock up the potentially number one pick, and literally would have locked up Caleb Williams, right? Essentially the consensus number one overall, and you've been having quarterback problems and struggles. I know you only took him 1 year ago. You expected a lot more from Bryce Young coming out of the gate. Now, am I saying Bryce Young time in Carolina is over? No. I think you have to give a young quarterback at least 2 years because sometimes as a rookie quarterback, you don't do anything.
Mhm.
Specifically, I can think of an instance with the Dallas Cowboys with Troy Aikman. He did absolutely nothing his rookie year, one of the worst teams in the NFL, and then they went on a run and won 3 Super Bowls with him in the 90s, right? So I don't necessarily think after one season you need to write off your quarterback right away. After 2 seasons, if the if the stats continue to look the same and you don't at least see year over year progression, then that's not good, right? You still got him for 3 more years because you're going to pick up the fifth year option on a first round pick in the NFL because you can do that. The new coaching staff brings in new questions, right? Is Bryce Young the guy?
Mhm.
The biggest question this new coaching staff brings in now. They got Baker Mayfield last year, and he made Baker Mayfield a playoff quarterback, and largely because of his offensive play calling. So
True.
there's definitely a better chance there. But go ahead, jump in, Tanner.
How much success is attributed to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin? The emergence of Rashad White.
Exactly. How much of it is on their shoulders? The answer is go look at the offense and go look at how much percentage they got the ball. It's at
Mhm.
least 60 to 70. So there's your answer, right? It's not 70. That's probably a little steep. Because Chris Godwin was hurt for a little bit. It did take White a little while to come on, and then Mike Evans just consistently just freaking balls every year.
Mhm.
Shout out Mike Evans, Gigamags. Yeah, I mean, it comes up to a lot of those guys, and then the other question comes, right? Like, here's my biggest thing, and here's the rant I'm going to go on, and the reason I brought these points up today, because if these guys drafted well, these head coaches or these offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, if they drafted well, how much pull do they have when they draft, right? That's the biggest thing when you're a young team or when you're a team that's at the bottom of your division and a team that needs maybe a rebuild. Maybe you're in the process of doing a rebuild, like the Falcons, the Panthers. They're in the process of it, right? They're not necessarily ready to go and playoff ready. That's technically a rebuild. or put yourself into a bad team. You got a couple categories. You got 3 categories in the NFL. What are you going to do? You got to put yourself in one of those categories. Bringing that to my original point, you got to find guys in the draft. You got to find guys in the draft. You can't just rely on free agents. And the always scary thought for me, whenever you see an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator go to a new team and is a head coach, my first thought is how much input did they have in the draft room? Because usually it's the head coach, the scouting department, and the general manager. If the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator is coming in and giving them, obviously, they don't have no pull, but do they have a ton of pull? So the other question, too, about the Carolina Panthers, now this guy not only has to come in and draft well because of the roster's not as good as where he came from in Tampa Bay, but he has to hit on those draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
Because the existing roster of the Carolina Panthers, you have one player at roster, and his name is Brian Burns, and that's about it. That is a lock-in. There's no way they're getting rid of that guy. That guy's going to stay there, right? They also got a tackle that they took a couple years ago, but I'm going to wait a couple more years to call out his name. That's my biggest thing is the Panthers, right? That's my biggest question with the Panthers. The Falcons, you said it in a couple episodes ago, they have good guys in key positions, and they're young. That's scary. They just need a quarterback. That's what they need. They need a quarterback, and they need a little bit better on the – not a little bit. They need big help on the defensive side.
But it's been improving.
The offensive side is mostly there. Carolina Panthers, man, that's got to be one of the hardest jobs to walk into. One of the hardest jobs to walk into. And why would you not get a guy like Belichick, like Vrabel?
I know.
Why Carroll? Pete Carroll, if he's still available. He said he would leave Seattle if he had a better option. And he's the best drafter out of those 3 guys. All you need to do is draft well. So I'm just bummed because, we have the best head coaching carousel that we've ever had, and these guys aren't getting signed. You know what I mean? Maybe that's, maybe that's why we get some listeners because we have these views. But I don't understand. I physically don't understand how these guys are still out there. But one hire that actually made sense to me. Okay, we've already hit on Harbaugh to the Chargers, already hit on Dave Canales to the Panthers, already hit on the Falcons getting Raheem Morris. We on briefly that Vrabel and Belichick and Pete Carroll are still out there. Here's one that I agree with. I agree with the Chargers so far, and I agree with this team so far. And it's the Raiders. Antonio Pierce is the guy. He's the guy. It's just that simple. Not only does he have the locker room, he has the fan base. And did you see that man's press conference today?
Pretty sick.
Dude started the press conference yelling into the microphone about the Raiders. Is that not just the most Raiders thing you've ever seen in your life?
Oh, yeah.
That guy embodies team. And I can't wait to see what they do moving forward with the key pieces that they have on their team, with Max Crosby and with Devontae Adams and with Josh Jacobs. To lock up Josh Jacobs' future, we got to make sure Devontae Adams stays. Oh, guess what? Antonio Pierce said last year he's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the Raiders made a great hire here.
I completely agree. I mean, when you have guys, big stars that are on your team, Max Crosby, Josh Jacobs, coming out to the media and saying, if this head coach is not hired, I'm demanding a trade. That is 100% indicative of what your point was with the locker room. He has this team, and they respect him, and they want him to stay and continue to coach this team. Now, when you actually look at the performance and how they played last year, it was phenomenal considering the circumstances that they had. Look at their quarterback situation. They had a lot of struggles. They did not have a consistent quarterback that you can rely on in the NFL.
Who's their quarterback to end the season?
Aiden O'Connell, right? So
keep going.
It's one of those things. If you can play, if you can make plays with this guy, I'm not saying Aiden O'Connell's a terrible quarterback, but he's not the cream of the crop in the NFL. But he's love the guy. He has done everything that he has needed to do in Vegas, and I completely respect that. And look at what he did given the circumstance. That talking about Antonio Pierce. I think a lot of guys are young. A lot of guys love that locker room, and like you said, man, he embodies this team, and this team loves him. And so, why would you not keep him? We talked a week or two ago about I think the Raiders' old interim head coach after they fired Gruden and they got rid of him, and everyone was like, why? But I think they kind of saw those demons coming back, and they were like, all right, let's hire this guy, because this seems like a good decision, and I really like it. I really do. I think the Raiders are, one of the next up and coming teams. If they continue to do this, they continue to get good players and skill positions. And I mean, look at their roster. Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby, like you said, Devontae Adams. These guys. You put a good quarterback, a decent quarterback in that situation. That team's nasty. Like that team's going to be so good. And great hire. I think it's one of the better hires in the league. It's the one situation I think that I wouldn't have changed, considering all the head coaching rumors that we've been seeing, but maybe not like New England or anything like that. But I love it. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. And to hit on a couple of your points, kind of nailed it, right? This was the one situation that didn't really need to change. Because, like we said, he already has the locker room. He has Raiders Nation on his back. He's ready to go. And the only question I have to this guy, it's not about coaching. I get better year over year in terms of play calling, in terms of coaching, in terms of, when you're a former player, you know the schemes, right? It takes guys like Tanner and I, who didn't play college football and professional football, it takes us a little bit longer to understand that. He walks into a room, sees X's and O's, and he automatically knows whether it's a cover 3 or cover 2, right? He knows all this stuff. This guy's really knowledgeable, and the hardest part, I would argue, one of the hardest parts, not the hardest part. The hardest part about being an NFL coach is winning and winning Super Bowls and winning a ton of games. But the second hardest part, I would argue, maybe even a little bit harder than the first, is to get that team to respect you, get that locker room to continue respect you even when you're losing, right? Because the Raiders didn't necessarily have the best season last year. You have inconsistent quarterback play. Of course, you're not going to have the best season. You also have a, coaching change in the middle of the year. Probably not going to have the best season, right? So I think all signs are pointing up for the Raiders. I don't know if they're necessarily going to finish better in their division. I think if they let Josh Jacobs go, this team progresses year over year. But if they keep Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams is already locked up. He's going to stay there. Max Crosby, he's not going anywhere. Only realistic, or the only player that we don't know what's going to happen is Josh Jacobs, because he was on that 1-year contract last year. Last thing I'll say about Antonio Pierce, he knows his guys, and he's going to keep his guys. So if you're a player that gets drafted by the Raiders and Antonio Pierce is the head coach, and you play well and you run through a wall like Max Crosby and Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs do, you're probably going to be on that team for 10, 15 years. So we'll see how long the reign happens, because I would argue probably one of the hardest fan bases in all of football to get behind. Being those fans are ruthless, man. Those fans are absolutely ruthless, and they're in Vegas now. It's not like when the Raiders were back in Oakland. They had a black hole literally in their stadium for right behind their end zone, because you knew just not to go there in the stadium. Like that's the reputation that Raiders Nation has. Now they're in Vegas and they can rage even harder, and everybody from Oakland can still pop over. Right? It's the perfect team, and this is the perfect guy to lead it. So let's see what happens, Raider Nation. A couple rumors to end it out. We already talked about why Vrabel is still there. The last thing I want to hit on for the listeners, you come back and listen to our outlandish Cowboy takes. We got another one coming right here for you. We talked about it briefly about McCarthy staying in Dallas, but Tanner kind of mentioned it a little bit, kind of teased it a little bit. We don't know what's going to happen with Dan Quinn. Dallas has no idea what's going to happen with Dan Quinn. He is still out there looking at jobs. He's still out there getting interviews, but nobody's really signed Dan Quinn yet. So with McCarthy already being there, Dallas literally not firing anybody else, them keeping the entire coaching staff from last year. Is this just a different year? Or is next year just going to be a same result? It's going to be a 10-7, 12-5 season again, first round get knocked out, because Dallas is not making single change coaching staff unless Dan Quinn walks. And they're not going to let CeeDee Lamb. And now there's rumors about Dak Prescott being signed early. So I just threw a lot at you. What do you think about the Cowboys situation specifically with the possibility of Dan Quinn leaving and Mike McCarthy coming back and retaining play calling?
I I think it's when you think about like the long term when it comes to like his tenure and like what like was kind of like expected with him. We again we talked about it like the other episode. It just doesn't feel right to make a coaching change. Obviously, we all wanted it to happen. You know, McCarthy's record in the playoffs speaks for itself. We wanted a coaching change, but it's hard to, especially in the last year of Dak's contract, the last year of you know, if you bring in a head coach. They're gonna have to implement their whole new system. You know, I'm kind of rehashing what I said the other episode. It's just you don't want to put Dak in that situation to fail. And you know, they are a good team. I think this is probably the best team that I've seen Dak play on, and that's including his freshman year or you know his rookie season. I think this is the best that he has looked individually, the best that the overall team and the offense has looked. You know, maybe without Zeke, that his rookie season was obviously extremely dominant, but this is the best team, best offense, best defense I've seen, you know, in this century. You know, I love Tony Romo and I love what he did for the Cowboys, but it's just like that this team has had back to back to back 12-5 seasons, and you can't deny that. They're regular season warriors, they always have been. But they've been dominant in the regular season when it comes to the wins, you know, the categories that you want to see. But when it comes to the playoffs, when it comes to those bigger matchups, they just fail. And I think they're kind of grasping, giving them one last chance to see if you can do it. I think that's really what it is. You know, you've put together this team. It's time to put up or shut up. You know, if you don't make a big playoff run this next postseason, then you're gone. And that's kind of how I think Jerry's going to play it. And you know, same with Dak potentially. Yeah, there's a lot of cards on the table. I think Jerry just kind of went all in with this coaching staff, and if it doesn't work, he's blowing them up. And I really don't hate it because there's not a lot of other options you can do in this situation because you really can't bring in another coach and expect him to have immediate results, especially like I said with Dak on the last year of his contract. A lot of things would have to change, and a lot of things would have to change really quickly, and you don't want to do that, and you don't want to put yourself in a position to have to do that. I think what Dallas wants to do is they want to control the division. They want to control what they can. Philadelphia looks really weak right now. They actually just signed a new defensive coordinator, which is a pretty good hire. Um, and they need to compete. They really do. McCarthy usually gets his boys playing well. Dak plays well against the division. I think they just want to give themselves the best shot that they can right now to make the Super Bowl. You know, it's obviously as further as it feels like it's been in recent memory, but you know, the team is good. The team is a good team. They play well during the regular season. All they got to do is put it together in the playoffs. McCarthy's been to a Super Bowl. He's won it. So I don't really blame them for going down this path because I think it's the most logical path. But you know, you could say the writing's on the wall. It could be, and that's fine. But I think you let this coaching staff have one more shot at it, and this entire roster, regardless if Dan Quinn is there or not, they'll get you know someone who knows the system pretty well. And I think a lot of the other coaches, you know, the defensive backs, linebackers, those kinds of coaches, I think they're coming back. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if Dan Quinn's taken his whole staff, but I like it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I like it. I think it's fine. It's not a head turning move. You know, it's not Bill Belichick. It's not Mike Vrabel. But that's not what they're trying to do, to be fair. They're trying to give one last shot at it. Just make another one last ditch effort to see if this roster can work. And, you know, not to go on a ramble here, but you saw it with Jason Garrett. You know, he had too many seasons in Dallas. He probably should have been gone in about half the time, and that's about where we're at with Mike McCarthy. So, you know, Jerry doesn't like to say goodbye, and that's okay because he likes to let the culture sit and let it ferment because he knows what it can do for a team. You know, you don't want to be the Carolina Panthers firing head coach every single year. That's just it's not smart. It doesn't make sense, and you want to let them, you know, live out their tenure and see what they can do. So I think that's what Jerry's doing. You don't know until you know. So Uh, we're gonna
That's,
see where
I
it
mean,
goes.
that makes complete sense. And being a Cowboy fan for so long, yeah, I got you there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I get you there. We haven't seen a ton of head coaches in terms of since we've been alive, right? There has not been a lot of head coaches since we've been alive. Now, like from the top of my head, we had a couple coaches in the '90s, right? We had a couple coaches in the '90s. There, we had Jimmy Johnson. We had his replacement, who I can't think of off the top of my head. Um, and then we have a guy like Bill Parcells that comes in. You have a guy, Wade Phillips, that comes in. Then you have Jason Garrett that comes in. Then you have Mike McCarthy that comes in. So, I mean, just right there alone, that's 7 coaches in the last 30 years. So, not a coach every season, like Tanner was saying with Carolina. But to me, I look at this coaching staff and I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying, but I'm already seeing the rumors that Dak Prescott is going to be signed to a new contract. I'm going to argue a lot of the other side of the point is why not bring in a whole new coaching staff if you're going to sign CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott to a whole new deal right now and just start over right now? That's kind of my argument, and that's kind of my thing of why I wanted to let McCarthy go, and why honestly I wanted to let Dan Quinn go and bring in somebody of a caliber like Bill Belichick, of Mike Vrabel, of Pete Carroll. Bring in somebody of a caliber like that. Is if you match up a coach that can not actually match up a coach that is very good at drafting with Pete Carroll, right? And you already have the scouting department that Dallas has, and Will McClay is already there, right? This team becomes 2 years away from being a dynasty, in my opinion, because Pete Carroll just hits at least 2 picks every draft, right? Dallas in the most recent years since Mike McCarthy's been here has not had the best drafts. You go look at who they've taken in the first round specifically. Sorry, Michigan. A lot of ends and a lot of defensive tackles in Michigan are not really holding up. Second round picks recently have been doing okay, but other than that, you usually see from rounds 5 to 7, you're not expecting those guys to make the team. You're really not. If they make the team, that's a plus. You're expecting round 1 to make the team, round 2, obviously, and round 3 and 4, you're trying to get those guys to start at some point in the regular season. Round 4 even is, potentially practice squad guys. So Dallas does have a good history of getting these guys in the 6th round with Anthony Brown, right? With getting these corners in the sixth round, but it's the same song and the same dance. And I realistically don't think I can go into next season saying that Dallas is going to go to the NFC Championship, because they have not done anything on this roster that is going to upgrade them from where they were this season. And we already know what happens to Mike McCarthy when he goes against great head coaches or his former freaking team for some reason. He doesn't make coaching adjustments. Neither does a defensive coordinator. Dan Quinn didn't make any coaching adjustments in that game that we lost. So I can't wait next year to lose in the first round or second round again. That's kind of my take on the Cowboys season going next year. I'm not gonna, always I'm gonna be stoked for football. Of course, I get more excited for the draft than I actually do like Christmas. But that's my take on the situation. Is that CeeDee Lamb's gonna be re-signed this offseason. Dak Prescott's I thought was gonna be re-signed next offseason, but it looks like it's gonna be this offseason. So you got Mike McCarthy on a 1-year deal. If he doesn't make it, you're officially blaming the coaching staff, and then you're bringing in a whole new coaching staff again, and Dak Prescott's already there. What if Bill Belichick comes in? What if he's not signed and Bill Belichick comes in and says, "I don't want Dak"? What happens? Right? What happens? There's a lot of question marks, and a lot of these guys, since I would argue Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson, none of these guys will stand in Jerry's way. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys. Nobody stands in his way. It almost seems like to me it's like a yes man. Hell, Mike McCarthy had a freaking sleepover at this guy's house to get hired. Respect, awesome, right? That having a sleepover at Jerry Jones' house. Are you kidding me? But Dallas has gotten in their own way, and they've continued to do it in the last couple seasons, which is not the most fun when you're a fan. But this division's weak right now, and the Philadelphia Eagles are a team that fell off a cliff end of last season, and you don't know what's going to happen next season. That is the biggest question mark in the NFC East, because you know what Washington is. They're shit, but they're getting better. Giants, they need better drafting, and I don't know what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. We don't know what's going to happen with Saquon. They need to get a whole lot of receivers, but they could be back in that playoff mix like they were not last year, but the previous year, or last year, yeah, last year. They lost to Philly in the playoffs, them being the Giants. You have Dallas that's going to win 10 games at least, going to win 12 games at least, and going to make the playoffs, but just disappear in the playoffs. So my biggest thing about the takeaway from this hire is that Dallas is going to go one more year. They're all in for one more year with this exact same coaching staff, and pretty much to be the exact same roster with addition of some free agents, maybe. Dallas signs maybe 1 to 2 free agents in offseason. Thank God they signed Stephon Gilmore this offseason. That was the most clutch signing we've had in free agency in a long time. But if you go look, Dallas signs under 5 to 10 guys in free agency every single season, and they have the last 15 years. So free agency is not where you're doing it, and it's drafting. Like I said, the most recent years, the draft hasn't been the greatest. So that's why I do all of my own scouting stuff. As believe it or not, I've been right a couple times. Moving on to I got to talk about this. Last point on Vrabel. Is he a defensive coordinator now? If teams clearly aren't going to take him, head coach, and maybe he still does, right? You still have a lot of teams that are open. There are opportunities that are open right now.
Not
Those
that,
being
not
Seattle,
that many. 2.
There's
Washington,
Seattle. You've got Seattle, Washington, and there's one more.
Is it
Can't
Tennessee?
think of off the top of my head.
Because he's not going back to Tennessee.
Tennessee, thank you. Tennessee, thank you. That's it. But yes, you're right. He's not going back to Tennessee. But Washington, that's a team that just got bought by a new ownership group.
Actually, before you continue, I think Washington is going to have their eyes on another guy. From what I've seen on Twitter and stuff like that, Bill Belichick is not going to be in Washington. They have no interest in pursuing Belichick and appear focused on Ben Johnson. So that's kind of the rumor around Washington right now. And Seattle hasn't even requested to interview Belichick. So, obviously you're talking about Vrabel, but if you're not looking at Belichick, why are you looking at Vrabel? It's kind of a similar situation, So very similar kind of culture kind of thing that he brings to the table. But continue. I don't know. You know what I mean? These are the last 2 big head coaching jobs in Tennessee. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's not going to be Vrabel.
Yeah, and that's a great point there. Thanks for bringing that up. It's one of those things of why, right? That's the theme of this episode is just why. There's 3 head coaches out there right now that are, in my opinion, an A+ hire as soon as you bring them in, and none of them have been signed. And Belichick is not going to go down to not being a head coach. Pete Carroll is still in the game in Seattle, and I just don't think he's gotten a sweet enough offer yet to actually make him leave Seattle. The reason they keep Carroll there, by the way, is because he drafts so well. So that's one of those things. It's a testament to how good he is as a drafter. And Vrabel, does this mean he becomes a defensive coordinator now? Because I don't think he's going to be an offensive coordinator necessarily. What happens with guys like this, right? You see this whenever you see big head coaches that don't get signed, they go to college. And is Vrabel in college next year? There's still teams that are out there. Like we said, we'll see what happens with these head coaches, but Belichick could walk away right now and be completely fine, right? Could be labeled as arguably the greatest head coach of all time if he walked away right now. Clearly, he's still got some skin in the game because he's taking and fielding offers right now. But yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that as well. I'm seeing that rumor that you said with Johnson with Washington. I'm also seeing Dan Quinn rumors with Washington as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2 coaches right there that that last one we'll talk about right there is Dan Quinn. Honestly, I thought whenever Dallas got eliminated, he was going to get signed pretty quickly. And he hasn't gotten signed pretty quickly. I don't know whether that's because of the massive collapse the defense have had the last couple weeks of the season, or if that's just there's other guys that they're going for, which is the new young toy head coach, right? That's probably what's going on here, going to a younger game. But we'll see what happens. Vrabel, Belichick, Dan Quinn. Maybe in a podcast in a couple weeks we will talk about where they got signed. Done with the coaching talk for this episode. Now we're talking about teams that were eliminated last week, and I got a question for Tanner on each of these. Buffalo got eliminated, the Texans got eliminated, Tampa got eliminated, and the Packers, thank goodness, got eliminated. So You've got all these teams that are no longer there. We're going to get to the matchup preview and pick section here in a little bit. But the Bills, the Buffalo Bills. Let's start out with them. Wasn't Josh Allen's fault again. That's crazy part to think about. This is the second time he's lost to Kansas City that it quite literally was not his fault. You and I have talked about this at length on the phone this week and even watching the game. Why does Buffalo continue to go down, score at the end of the game, and then give the ball to Patrick Mahomes with time on the clock? Why does any team, you know what I mean? Why does any team give Patrick Mahomes the ball at the end of the game? Well, question is because Buffalo had a wide open touchdown and they dropped it. Right? That's the question this week. But Tanner, what'd you see with that game? We're both huge Josh Allen fans. We both picked the Bills to win and Kansas City won. We shouldn't have picked against playoff Pat. What did you see in that game? Because to me, it looked like Buffalo was the better team.
They were, and you look and you watch that game, and that's the best Kansas City has played all season, right? They have had a bad season, and this is kind of their get right game. They got up in there and they're like, we know we can beat Buffalo, and they went in there and they did. It's not that KC played bad. It's not that Buffalo played bad. I think KC played a really good game. They got Travis Kelce, involved after this entire season of, he's been nowhere to be seen. And then Josh Allen did what Josh Allen does. He made plays. He got touchdowns. He put his team in the greatest position. But it's just, it sucks to, miss a field goal with Tyler Bass in the conditions that were out there. But, that's kind of what it came down to. We all knew it was going to be a close game. It wasn't going to be a blowout. And if you miss points like that, it's going to cost you. It really sucks because I wouldn't put that kick on Tyler Bass because it was a further kick, and in the wind conditions and just the overall weather conditions were terrible. He hits that kick, it's tied, and we potentially go into overtime, and we'll see what happens. But I just don't. It's a Buffalo secondary, a Buffalo defense in general that's been banged up all year, and KC has had their number every single time they've played in the playoffs. So they didn't do a lot different, and they continue to do what they wanted to do. I don't know. It's just starting to seem like one of these things that's just like it's going to happen every single playoffs, and I'm not here for it, really. But I don't know. I don't know where Buffalo goes from here. I think it's interesting that you pose the question that you have yet to ask with Stefon Diggs.
What happens? Yeah, what happens with Diggs this offseason? Because you led right into it. Since week 8, he had a decent playoff game against the Chiefs, but against week 8, he was not the leading wide. Since week 8, he was not the leading wide receiver on that football team. When you're paying him that much money, and he wants to win, and clearly you're getting out in the first round or second round every year, what happens? What happens with Stefon Diggs? Is he back? Does he come back? Do you think Stefon Diggs comes back, Tanner?
I think he does. I really do. I think he's still a really good dominant receiver in the NFL. He just kind of fell off a cliff. I wouldn't jump ship just yet, but it is an issue. You see these guys show their true colors in the playoffs, and I think Diggs has unfortunately been on both sides of that. Fortunately and unfortunately. You remember the Minneapolis Miracle back when he was back in Minnesota? He won them that game. That was the reason that he was so sought after as a receiver, because he can make big plays like that in big moments, and we've seen him do it in seasons past, even in this season, just not at the end. I'm going to chalk it up right now to just, bad luck, getting play called out of the game. And, Josh Allen is progressing as a quarterback where he doesn't need a single read. He's like, all right, Diggs is covered. I'm going to go somewhere else. We all know he loves Gabe Davis. Shakir has had a great coming on year as well. Back when Cole Beasley was there, that's the role he played. So I think Josh Allen is just progressing as a quarterback, and that was the reason, especially their offense just evolving as a team, as an overall offense. You had James Cook come in there and be one of the best running backs in the second half of the season. So it's kind of, one goes up, the other one must go down. So it's just, I think you just saw the absolute explosion of James Cook, of Josh Allen's his progression as a quarterback, and at fault was Stephon Diggs, and it's easy to point fingers. So I really love Stephon Diggs. I think he's still an amazing receiver in the NFL. I think he's going to stay in Buffalo because that looks like his home. Him and Josh Allen weren't on the same page, not necessarily in that playoff game, but I've seen them do it before. What makes you say that they can't do it again? So I think this offseason they're going to take a long look in the mirror and say, what is wrong with our team? Because there's not a lot. There really isn't. And why do we keep losing to Kansas City wherever we play? Doesn't matter if it's at home, doesn't matter if it's away. We lose in games that we feel like we've won. It's just, it really sucks. And I think they just need to go and evaluate what that team is in the offseason and come back with another game plan. It's very similar to the Cowboys. Like why does this keep happening? I don't know, because we're good. I promise the roster's good. But it sucks, but they go down again. And I think I would just keep that team together and give it another shot next year. Hopefully you can avoid Kansas City. Hopefully something happens and you don't have to play them. In that case, I think Buffalo wins the Super Bowl, bro. Like, I mean, they've looked like the best team in the playoffs every single season.
Yeah, but one team that wasn't there this year was Joe Burrow.
Very true.
Now you got a quarterback that wasn't even there this year, and who knows if Kansas City has a good year next year, right? Like, all signs were pointing to the Cowboys this season playing the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and all signs pointed to the Buffalo Bills playing the Baltimore Ravens in the NFC Championship game or AFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm.
All signs pointed for that, but that's what playoff football is. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's why it's the playoffs, right? That's why Tanner and I, the first week of the playoffs picked a couple games wrong, right? Because we just didn't see what was actually going to happen. I mean, who saw the Packers absolutely destroying Cowboys, right? Who saw the Bucks just destroying Eagles, right? And then who sees a team with Buffalo that starts out really well against Kansas City, and then Kansas City doesn't hit the same stride Buffalo does in the game? Honestly, I mean, it didn't look won. It looked like Buffalo knew they were going to win the game, right?
Yeah,
it looked like that they were like, we got this. This year's different. And then at the end of the game, like you said, same result, just taken right out from underneath them. So
I think so too. Before you move on, I think you should place some blame on Buffalo. I don't think it's solely just the greatness of Patrick Mahomes that you chalk this up to. I think Buffalo needs to do a better job at getting points on the board late in the game, because you remember that that touchback that happened when one of the Chiefs players fumbled it out of the end zone. What does Buffalo do after that? Nothing. The only significant drive they had towards the end of that game was that field goal drive where they inevitably missed. So you got to do, if you want to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, you have to play a full 60 minutes at your best. If you don't, you're going to lose the game. It really stinks. And I think the perfect game to show that is that game where Patrick Mahomes scored in 13 seconds in that divisional round a couple years back. Or maybe, you have to play the game perfect if you want to beat Patrick Mahomes. And they didn't, and they didn't win. So I think it is the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, but I think you have to put yourself in a position to beat him, which the best playoff teams will. If Baltimore, given what they do, we'll get into those picks, but it's going to be interesting going into that matchup, because like I said, you got to play a perfect game. And Patrick Mahomes doesn't like to mess up in the playoffs.
And you hit a point earlier with the Chiefs too. Kelsey's now on,
and
that's pretty scary, because this season he really wasn't. What's going to happen? Is Mark Andrews going to come back for the Ravens? Who knows? Maybe he makes a Super Bowl appearance. Maybe he makes AFC Championship appearance. He wasn't ready to go last week, even though there was speculation that he would be back. His counterpart, Isaiah Likely, tight end that I actually had a second round grade on, he has stepped up. He's played extremely well, and you don't know what's going to happen. We will hit that section in our matchup preview and picks. But the point that you had about Buffalo that I completely agree with is that you do got to take a long, hard look at this roster and see where realistically you can shed some contracts and where you can get a little bit better. I mean, if you have some veteran guys, maybe throw in a draft pick in there. when you get it, maybe invest in a high draft pick, right? They invest in skill positions and I think what Buffalo does in the draft specifically is they draft the best player available, right? That's why you saw them get Dalton Kincaid. They already had Dawson Knox. They didn't need a tight end. They definitely didn't need a tight end that high, but they did. And he was the number one tight end on a lot of people's boards, not Sam Laporta. And, he didn't have a bad season, right? But that's kind of what you see what happens with Buffalo. And you saw Kincaid starting to come on at the end of the season big time. Moving on to the Texans, like we said, they were eliminated. More successful of a season than I think anybody thought. I think you have to put this season up as not only a win but a massive win. And I think that the Texans position themselves now with the play of C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell. They're only going to get better in the draft. Clearly, this team knows how to draft. Clearly, if there's a guy in the top of the first round that they want, they're going to go get. And guess what? This is a huge wide receiver class. It's extremely top heavy. I have 15 wide receivers, 16 wide receivers in the top 100. Usually I don't have that many wide receivers in the top 100, but there's a lot of guys, top 100 guys in this draft. If you're a Texans fan, season's, I think, going to be even better. And I think that this division now is completely from the Jacksonville Jaguars to the Houston Texans to be the favorite. Coming into last season, Jacksonville Jaguars were the favorite. Now this season coming up, I think the Texans have to be the favorite, especially because guess what? CJ Stroud gets another year in the system and learns or continues to get better. So Houston, hell of a season, and I can't wait to see what happens again next year because Texans are going to be good for a long time with CJ Stroud, and we haven't even announced who's going to, they haven't announced who's going to win Rookie of the Year. Obviously, it's going to be CJ Stroud, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and rookie quarterback that threw over 4,000 passing yards. Absolutely terrifying, especially when his number one wide receiver was Tank Dell. Got hurt in the middle of the season. No disrespect to Tank Dell, but I mean, come on, man. That's a team that's a scary football team, especially CJ Stroud getting better year over year.
Yeah, you can't really blame them for not winning that playoff game, man, because it's just Baltimore's defense is impossible to play against if you're a rookie quarterback. I don't care who you are, but look at that. Take that a loss with a grain of salt because replay that matchup in 4 or 5 years and see what happens. I think CJ Stroud, he's got a lot to learn. Obviously, he's off to a fantastic start, but he's only going to get better. I don't see him going down from here, especially with the confidence that he has in this coaching staff, and this team, and that city in general, in Houston. They all got his back. Everyone's got his back, and he knows it. They know it. That team's going to be good for a while if CJ Stroud is there. And like I said, I think you replay that game in a couple years, and it's potentially a different result. Baltimore's defense is just historically good, and they always have been. So I really can't take a rookie quarterback in that situation anyways, because it's just CJ Stroud, and there's not a whole lot else they got going for him right now. Like you said, Tank Dell went out for the season. Nico Collins, he's played pretty well. And CJ had a lot of really, really good throws in there, but they just didn't get in the end zone. They didn't convert when they needed to. Their special teams played pretty well, and their defense didn't. So it's just...
You know who, though, on the defensive side of the ball, to jump in real quick, who did play well? Was Will Anderson Jr.
Yeah, he did.
Will Anderson Jr. was about the only player on the defensive side of the ball in Houston that played real well. And that's something you really like to see, especially when you trade up.
Especially against Baltimore, too.
In the draft. Against Baltimore. Against Stanley. Against Tyler Lindenbaum.
Disgusting.
Bro, the best center. By the way, called that one, too.
Yeah, we
called
know.
Both of those guys, too.
Oh, I know.
So, dude.
Shouldn't have drafted a defensive tackle from Michigan.
just
sorry.
This team's gonna be sick, right? Like this team's gonna be sick in the future. And imagine CJ Stroud in 5 years. Imagine CJ Stroud.
That's what I'm saying.
5 years.
It's gonna be gross, like disgusting.
How many passing yards does he have?
The league, like 6,500. The league's gonna be at that point. We see quick change here.
Right.
He's gonna be throwing for 800 yards a game. No, I don't know, but he's gonna continue to get better and better and better, and that team's gonna get better and better and better because now they know how to draft. Let's go Texans.
And they haven't historically. They haven't had the best drafts historically. That's been their one problem is drafting, and not a lot of people want to go to Houston. Just kidding. A lot of people love Houston.
It's great now,
me included. great now. It's great now. Moving on to Tampa Bay. I really only have one note here: shake and bake. What I mean, Baker Mayfield. Just nobody again thought that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to outplay the Saints at the beginning of the season. I listened to the experts. Okay, none of them picked them except for these two experts right here, Tanner and I. Right, was the Bucs. At the beginning of the season, we both talked about it. Tanner called them winning the division. I said, why the heck not? Let's throw the Saints in because I wanted to pick somebody different than Tanner did. And guess what? The Saints missed it by one game, and the Bucs won it by one game. Right, so this division is really, really, really close. And next year, Tampa could not win the division. This is a division, personally, that if they keep the rosters similar like they have them now, I think this is going to be like the NFC East. I think you're going to have a different winner pretty much every other year. Atlanta with this new hire they made. The Saints could come out next season and start balling out. You never know. Derek Carr at the end of this season had one hell of a game. You know what I mean? He's starting to come on, and you don't know what's going to happen in his future there. So there's a ton of questions with that division specifically, but got to shout out Baker Mayfield. You kind of knew it was going to happen against the 49ers, but in their playoff game, but Tampa didn't play bad.
Yeah.
And at a point in that game, it looked pretty close, but got away from them, right? It got away from them, but Baker Mayfield, man, shake and bake. What do you got to say about the Bucs?
Against the Detroit Lions, they looked honestly a lot better than I thought they would. But it's just Jared Goff. He's playing at a historically great level. That team is fully their offense is peaking right now. Like they are just playing so well. And I really don't think Baker Mayfield played a bad game at all. I think he had, those two costly interceptions, one at the beginning and the one at the end of the game. But that's just, if you've been watching him play for a while, that's just kind of what happens with Baker. No offense, I've been hyping him up all season, but there is a reason that Cleveland let him go. And a lot of it is because of those turnovers and those big, just huge turnovers in the biggest moments. So especially, you start the playoff game, you don't want that interception, basically like a punt, and that big pass, and then the one at the end of the game to literally end the game. So it's Detroit's defense finally starting to come on. They're finally starting to play really well, and their offense has not missed a beat. So it's a hard one going in, but I think, like I said, I think Tampa made a really good game out of it, and I thought they played really, really well. And, you connect a couple more shots, and maybe Tampa has a shot to win that game. But it's going for the Detroit Lions. They're playing really good football right now. We'll get to matchup and picks later, but I think they're the dark horse to win this entire thing, especially with the teams that are presented in front of them. But do not blame this on Tampa Bay. If you're a fan, over there in Tampa, be happy like that. This team was not supposed to be good this year. You won your Super Bowl with Tom Brady, and you thought Baker Mayfield was coming in and just going to lay a big old stinker. He didn't. He's a winner. He's a competitive player, and he's knows how to control a locker room and a team and earn their respect. So I think Baker's going to get another contract extension. I think he's going to be there for a couple more years, and I think he's going to continue to play as well as he did. He's a good quarterback, but sometimes the wrong part of him shines in the biggest moments. So it's unfortunate, but you got to the divisional round of the playoffs. That's something to be really happy about.
Exactly. Great. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself there about Tampa. Packers. Last team we'll talk about. Then we're going to get to the matchup preview and pick section like we've been talking about for all the bettors out there. The future is bright with Jordan Love, clearly, right? Future's bright. Briefly going to go over his season quickly. He had a 64% completion percentage, not bad. 4,100 passing yards, not bad. 32 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. So a 3-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. That's not bad at all. You want to see a little bit better than that, but still not bad at all.
Pretty good.
And with a quarterback rating of 96.1.
That's pretty good.
Pretty damn good season. And not to mention, he won a playoff game against the Cowboys, right? So my question to you is, obviously Jordan Love's the guy. Mm-hmm. That's just going to be a blanket statement. What contract are we looking at with Jordan Love? Are we looking at a small contract, a more of a prove-it deal contract for the next couple of years? Or are we looking for roll the brink truck up and just open up the freaking doors.
You gotta open up the bank. I mean, how long has this guy been on your roster? He has been the next franchise quarterback from the last like 5 years. With Aaron Rodgers, he's been learning. There's no other guy. I don't think there's a prove it year out there for that. I think the prove it year was in training camp. And if they didn't like him, too bad. He's gonna be here. I think you give him a lot of money. I think hopefully if you can get away with Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott type contract, maybe a little bit more in the 42, 43, maybe even 45 range. Annual salary range. I think I'd be really happy with that, especially given the way he's played and the way he could potentially play. And the second half of his season was one of the greatest in the NFL this season. You look at that, I think it was like going into the Cowboys game, it was like 18 touchdowns to 1 interception in the second half of the season, 8 games. That's disgusting. And he's looking like a young Aaron Rodgers. Everyone's saying it. I'm tired of hearing it. And Brett Favre, it's like they made a little baby clone. Like it's like they just took like hairs when each of them left, the franchise, and they just put them in like a little beaker, a little test tube, and just grew them from like a little sprout. And that's Jordan Love. And I can't deny that he's a very good quarterback. And Green Bay is going to have another good one for another long time. If you're in that division, I'm sorry. Unless you're a Detroit Lions fan, then you're amped. But you even still lose to the Packers. So it's like this guy is going to be the future franchise, and you got to pay him a lot of money, a lot of money. But he is a first-round pick, so you do get that advantage when it comes to fifth-year options and stuff of that nature.
I mean, you said it. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I started the comment off with the future is bright. And I just wanted to peg the question because you don't know what's going to happen with this contract. You really don't know what's going to happen. Realistically, this guy has one year in the NFL, and you're about to sign him to a 4 to 5 year contract.
Yeah, give him 5. Like, come on. Like, Patrick Mahomes signed like 10 years that one time, or a couple years back, and I would give him 5. Like, why not, dude? Look at what he just did. He beat the Chiefs in the regular season, which a lot of people have been doing this season, but then he went in the playoffs and he destroyed the Cowboys. And that's what you do if you're a Packers player. You just destroy the Cowboys. So he's already checked off a lot of boxes, and he's about to check off more in the coming seasons.
He has half as many playoff wins as Dak Prescott already, so that's a pretty decent stat.
Don't say things like that.
I mean,
that is just mean.
I have to.
That just hurts.
I'm gonna keep throwing it in because I'm sick and tired of it. You know what I mean? I am just sick.
We got Mr. Tony Romo over here. He's not looking very happy at your comments.
I'll put my cowboy hat on for next episode. Maybe I won't bash him as hard. That's all we got with the teams, the coaching rumors, and everything. Now we're going to hit the matchup preview and pick section. This is the last section of the pod, and then at the very, very end of the podcast, we got a little bit of basketball news for you. So if you're a basketball fan, listen. Tanner's a big basketball guy. But Tanner, we got NFL Conference Championship round. Tell the listeners kind of what we did last week, how we did, and our overall season.
It's looking bright still. When we transition from Jordan Love over here to us, definitely a different future career path, but I'd say we're pretty good. I went 3-1 last week, and so did Chad. That brings our overall season records to me, 67-39, and Chad 66-40. So we're neck and neck once again, but I'm still leading by 1 game. I'm doing pretty well. Chad's down in the dumps over here. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, we're doing pretty well.
I'm in the dumps because, not to mention you beat me in the fantasy freaking championship. Sunday afternoon, we got the Chiefs versus the Ravens. Your trophy got lost in the mail. Sunday night, we got Lions and 49ers.
I got the deposit last week. It was pretty nice.
This is why you listen, because there's a little bit of shit talking usually at the end of the episode. Chiefs and Ravens, man. Go ahead. I've decided what I'm going to do this episode and this podcast. I want this known. Picking the team that you don't pick both of these times.
Really?
I'm sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of you just over there talking about how you're winning with 1 game. So I'm either going to be down by a couple games or be up. That I'm going all in at the end of this season. Who do you got?
That's really true. I hate to start this, man, because it's so hard to pick after last week because Baltimore looks amazing. They look like the best team in the NFL. And Lamar Jackson's going to win his second MVP, and it's well deserved. This team is firing on all cylinders. Zay Flowers was, the answer to their receiver problems. Isaiah Likely, like you said, he's come on. He's been Mark Andrews' replacement. And the defense, they just haven't missed a step. They haven't missed a step for the past like 20 years. And Roquan Smith has become the franchise middle linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. This team has everything right. There's nothing wrong with this team at all. They even have the best kicker in NFL history. So we're not going to get a Tyler Bass situation at the end of the game. But you know who's on the other side? Patrick Mahomes, who continues to prove everyone wrong regardless of the situation. Also a two-time MVP, but also has 2 Super Bowls to his name. I'm going to pick the Chiefs, and this is an unpopular opinion because I think the Ravens are the better team. I really do, and they're playing at home. It's crazy, but Patrick Mahomes, I learned a lesson with Patrick Mahomes that I learned with Tom Brady a long time ago. And that's you don't pick against Tom Brady in the playoffs, especially not in the AFC Championship game, unless it's someone who has his number. Now, we don't really know if Lamar Jackson has his number quite yet, but the only person I'm picking over Patrick Mahomes, is Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow's not in these playoffs. I've seen Joe Burrow destroy Patrick Mahomes more times than I can count, and he's not here. I love Lamar Jackson. I think that he's played an amazing season, and I think the Ravens are the better team. But I think, again, we're going to see the greatness of Patrick Mahomes come through, and I think he's going to make it to another Super Bowl, man. It's hard to guard Kelsey. They're one of the best combinations in playoff history. Rashee Rice is starting to come on. And
they're the best.
The defense has been playing, what they do. They do what they do, and they haven't really missed a beat either. So it's hard for me not to pick Patrick Mahomes, who has up to last week never played on the road, which is insane in the playoffs. And now he did it, and he looked the best he has all season. So I don't really think it matters where he plays. I don't think it matters who he plays. I think if you run to Patrick Mahomes and you're, I don't know. I'm going to pick the Chiefs. It might be crazy, and I don't want it to happen. I don't want the Chiefs to make another Super Bowl and watch that again. But I think it's going to happen, man. It's Baltimore, and they got Lamar looked great against the Texans, but they were playing the Texans, and I think the Chiefs played this, a very hot Buffalo team who had probably their best shot to win against the Chiefs, and they still pulled it out. So, give me the Chiefs. It's crazy, but give me the Chiefs.
You're going Chiefs? I'm going Ravens. That's really good because I predicted the Ravens to win the Super Bowl because, my conspiracy, remember a couple episodes ago?
I remember.
My hat on, and Harbaugh, already won the college football national championship. So I think the other Harbaugh is going to win a Super Bowl. I'm kind of glad you picked the Chiefs because now I get to be the guy that picks against Patrick Mahomes for the second week in a row. That's an L. I already know I'm going to lose now just by saying that out loud. But, the Ravens, this is the best team in the NFL. Tanner said it. This team, best team in the NFL in terms of defense at the end of the season, and in terms of positional players on the defensive side of the ball being able to make the best plays that they can possibly make.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Madubuike at A&M, that's an undersized defensive tackle that is just mauling everybody up the field or mauling the running backs and mauling the offensive line. If you get past him and you get past the big, beefy, mean line of the Baltimore Ravens, then you got to deal with Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, 2 of some of the fastest linebackers in the entire NFL, sideline to sideline linebackers. 100 tackle linebackers every single season. Roquan Smith, one of the best in the NFL, top 5. Queen's going to be there in a couple years. Mm-hmm. So this defensive team is the only team that I think has the ability to stop Kansas City and the only team that has the ability to potentially match up with Kelsey. Notice I said potentially. Nobody can match up with Kelsey, just like nobody can match up with Mark Andrews. That's the big question coming into this game.
Is he going to play?
The Baltimore Ravens have Mark Andrews. What?
I said, is he going to play? I'm asking.
I don't know. That's the biggest thing is last week I saw reports that Mark Andrews was supposed to play, and then he ended up not playing. So we'll see what happens with Mark Andrews. It looks like Tanner's looking it up right now. But Ravens are hard to pick against, right? That's a team that's really hard to pick against, but it's like you just said, who's on the other side?
Full participant at practice expected to play. So he's playing.
Mark Andrews is playing, folks. Thank you, Tanner.
Mhm.
That's why you're the engineer. I think that is massive. I think that's massive because I don't know who the Chiefs has that's going to be able to match up against him. Now, the one thing that they have that's in their favor is this guy hasn't played a football game in a while. But let's see what happens. Let's see if Lamar Jackson can continue his MVP race and continue to do that and go to a Super Bowl. And you are facing, or you did not have the hardest road in the playoffs, and you didn't arguably have the hardest road in the regular season. Now you're going up against the hardest possible opponent. This is the boss here. This is the boss. If you beat the boss, you're on to the Super Bowl, and it depends on who you play in the Super Bowl because there's another juggernaut on the other side there, in my opinion, and one team that's a year away.
It'd be
So,
both of them in the regular season.
oh my gosh, of course they did.
Yep.
So, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen? I'm going Ravens. Tanner's going Chiefs. Jumping to the other game, the Lions versus the 49ers. Tanner, kick us off, and then we will end this thing after a little basketball news.
I think this one's hard for me, but specifically because I love the Lions. I really do. If you've been listening to this
You should
podcast,
pick them.
I love the Lions. What? Because you want to be right? Is that why?
Because I want to pick the 49ers.
Well, everyone wants. I mean, they're good. They look like the better team. They're going to be playing at home. And Detroit has laid a stinker this year. 49ers have too, to their credit. But the Lions, I will pick the Lions. I'll have fun here. But it's hard for me to pick against the offense. But they haven't.
That's true.
They haven't had the easiest road. They haven't had the hardest road, I'll say, in the playoffs thus far. It's fun, but this Niners defense is really good, and the Lions are going to have to put up some amazing defense in return if they want to win this game, because every sign points to the 49ers, because I think they're the best team in the NFC by a long shot, in terms of just their roster and how well they're coached. But the Lions are kind of on that little Cinderella run right now. And I kind of mentioned that they were a dark horse, and I'm going to pick them to make the Super Bowl after I don't think they've ever been, which is kind of crazy. This is the farthest they've ever gotten. Tied with furthest, I think. But it's nuts. This is a good football team. Obviously the Final Four are all going to be really good. And I'm kind of technically picking the underdogs in both, but I think the Lions could do it. I think they can make a stand, and I don't want to see the Niners make a Super Bowl. No offense, I don't want to see them do it again. They've made an NFC championship in like the last 5 years, or they haven't made a playoffs. That's the Niners right there. They either go to the NFC championship or they don't make it at all. And guess what? They're here. And the last time they were here, sucked. Brock Purdy got hurt. Eagles went to the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles were technically still the better team, at the time, but who knows now? The Detroit Lions, they could go in there and they could absolutely make a statement. I think that's what Campbell wants them to do. I think that's what Campbell is going to aim to do. Will it happen? I don't know. I really don't. This is a really good Niners team, but I'm going to pick the Lions. You got to have confidence in the offense. You got to keep it rolling. They've got a lot of talent. I think they can play really well. And I'm going Lions, baby. I'm going Jared.
Here we go.
In the offense. I could be 0-2 in this week. It's very possible I could be 0-2.
And same with me. And then we have, a real fun time going into the Super Bowl is kind of what I'm thinking, because that's the last pick of the season.
If the Lions make the Super Bowl, I don't care who makes it in the AFC, Chad.
True.
True.
We already know who.
Come on.
We already know who you're going if the Lions make the Super Bowl. Well, like Tanner said, he got the Lions. I'm going 49ers. I kind of, didn't think he was going to pick against the offense. Kind of, yeah. I don't know about that. No, I'm just messing with you. And you said it, right? You say it. You said it, and I completely agree with it. What happened? Eli Manning had a magical run at the end of the season. They won the Super Bowl. Happened when the Lions are coming on a magical run. Nobody picked them to win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody picked them to win except for Detroit. Except for Detroit fans. Detroit fans picked them to win. Nobody else. Detroit's like, okay, the season has come to an end. Well, they're in the NFC Championship game, folks. This team could surprise everybody and go out there and, like you said, make a statement against the 49ers, because the 49ers last week looked a little vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they looked a little vulnerable. They took a while to get going. Eventually, they started to get going. But if you stall this Detroit Lions team and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jamison Williams. All these guys are going. That's a pretty terrifying team. You know what I mean? That's a pretty terrifying team. And yes, I think that the best team in the NFC is the 49ers, because if you look at the roster, like 50 Pro Bowlers on that roster and the best offensive lineman in the league, arguably the best. We could go down the roster. We've already done that many times this season, but I think this one's going to be close. And I think that the 49ers finally make it to the Super Bowl, but I think it's going to be really close. And I think that Detroit's magical season does come to an end this week. But to be fair, I'm not sure anybody aside from that organization had them making the NFC Championship game and or the Super Bowl, right? This team is a team that if you're a fan of, they're the most liked team in the NFL right now, in my opinion. This is the most liked team in the NFL. You never know with Kansas City; they're always up at the top, especially with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and all that stuff and all the popularity they're getting. They're probably number one. And then Dallas needs to not be number one, so maybe they can start winning some playoff games. But you've got a team right now, the Lions, that is the prototypical every year a team goes on a magical run. Sometimes they win the Super Bowl and sometimes they get bounced late, but they never get bounced early. So I hope the Lions win. I'm picking the 49ers, but I hope the Lions win, personally. I hope we see Lions in the Super Bowl because that fan base deserves it. That's it for the football talk. Tanner, you got anything more on the football side before I hit you with some basketball stuff?
No, man, I think we've pretty much covered it.
There we go. So we're going to end the pod with a little bit of basketball. Tanner's a basketball guy on this podcast, and I had to call this out because, I played a little 8th grade B team, 3rd string. You know what I mean? No big deal. PE, big elite athlete over here. Doc Rivers was hired as the new head coach for the Bucks. Take me through one. Doc, Giannis, Middleton, take me through that hire.
It's Doc Rivers. I think his resume speaks for himself. He's a very high profile coach in the NBA. I mean, he continues to get these high profile jobs. He's been doing it for a long time. I don't really understand why per se they got rid of their current head coach, or I guess their old head coach, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think they were at the time second, in their conference, and maybe Doc Rivers gives you a better chance. I'm not the biggest fan of this, honestly, because I know a lot of guys on that Bucks team were behind that old head coach, and you bring in a new guy in the middle of the season. It's really weird. And
Bucks are in second right now, you just said. They are 31-13, only behind Boston.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting.
It's really crazy, and they're having a really good season. Giannis is playing really well. Dame's playing really well. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, but time. It's
Game
about
time.
Game time. I wouldn't have done it if it were me personally. I wouldn't have done it. But the Bucks are a professional organization. They do whatever they want. And Doc Rivers is a really good head coach. I wouldn't have done it at the timing that they did it, because I think that kind of derails the season a little bit. Maybe they get going. Maybe they get going in the playoffs, and this is just a fantastic move, and we talk about it for generations. But, from the outside looking in right now, it seems a little drastic and panicky, who have they looked bad against? They lost to Cleveland really recently, and, Boston's playing really well, but we already knew that. That we've known that for a decent amount of time. It's just, the Bucks won a championship not that long ago, guys. Do you not remember that? So I don't know. It's really strange to me, but not the hugest fan, but I understand why they did it, because Doc Rivers, he's just a good head coach. I grew up watching Doc Rivers on the Clippers, bro. So it's okay, whatever, that's fine. I get why you did it, but I think the timing's a little weird.
The timing's definitely a little weird. It almost makes me think something happened with that head coach. Something had to happen behind the scenes somewhere, because it's why would you just leave in the middle of the season when you're quite literally second?
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't realize that they were that high up in the standings, but they were. I totally spaced. That's why I did that. I didn't even realize they got old Dame time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize. I totally forgot that, yes, Bucks were the team that got Dame time. So you've got Antetokounmpo. You've got Lillard, and you've got Chris Middleton sitting there with some stellar guys coming off the bench, and now you have Doc Rivers, who's a guy that has playoff experience. Maybe that's why they made the hire. That's kind of my take on it. It's like they already know they're going to make the playoffs. They're already in a spot where they know they're going to be there. They need to get that next little chip, get a little bit more over the hump to beat a team like Boston. But yeah, like you said, it's still the middle of the season. It's kind of interesting that happens in the middle of the season. But hey, maybe something happened, like we said, or Bucks really do just think Doc Rivers gives them a better chance to win in the playoffs, and they've already won a championship, so they can kind of make whatever decision they want. You never know, right? You could have star players button heads, and if that happens, you don't want to have the collapse of a team and go from second to seventh. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking it that way, but the Bucks are an exciting team, and Doc is an exciting coach. So that's why I wanted to end the pod on that. But we will talk sports next week. We'll see you later, folks.
Bye bye.